After going through this video, you will be able to maintain states in an application, explain how data flows between two components. In the previous topic, we introduced states to our app.js code, and by using them, we were able to change the color of the headings upon user interaction. In this video, we will learn a few more interesting things about states. That is, we will learn what is the best way to maintain the states and how data flows between the components. So, let us see how we can maintain states. To understand this concept, we first need to understand how states are categorized. We can categorize states mainly into two types. The first is the component state and the second is the application state. So far, we have been dealing with the component state in which we define the states to individual components. In React, we have seen that through props, any data can naturally flow down the components tree from a top level component to the child level components. Similarly, states data can also be passed down the component tree via props. But there is no way any data can flow up from a child component to a parent component. So, if states are defined to a child level component, there is no way it can be shared to other top level components. And this restricts the sharing of states across different components. And sometimes we might need to share states across different components as the state data might be needed in those components. For example, as we are changing the color of the heading of this box component, this new component which we just added is also using this information to show the correct stats, that is count. So the color of the box component is actually being shared with this new stats component. So the question arises, how can we share states across different components? Well, the answer is define all the states in the topmost component, which we call as application state. It gives us the flexibility to share state data down to any component in the app via props. Thus, states should be kept together and managed as high up in the application as possible so that all the components can have access to it. And if any data changes at the top, the change will float down through the component tree, updating each component. So this overall top to bottom data flow which we have been talking about since quite some time is known as unidirectional data flow. Let us understand all this with the help of an example. This is the output of our React code which we have written so far along with some additions. Let us discuss what these additions are. Here, instead of 6, we have 7 headings. But if we look at the bottom, we have this entire new section here that indicates total heading color count. It tells real time how many headings are of which color. Let me demonstrate it quickly. If I click on, say, the green button for the first and second heading, it will show the total count of green as 2 and the total count of black as 5. Means that out of 7 headings, 2 headings are of green color and 5 are of black color, which is true. And if we click on any other color, the heading color count will change accordingly. Now, the interesting question that follows is that how are we going to do this? Let us see how. It is pretty interesting. So, this was our previously written code for the app component which we discussed in the previous video. First, we will see how we can maintain this total count. For this, we need access to the color state of each of the box components all at once. And to do this, we need to convert the box component state to application state. This means we will move the color state up to the top level app component. So let us see how we can convert the app component into a class component so that it can store states. And for this, we will add a render function and put the return statement as it is inside the render function. So let us make the changes in the code. Now, the next step is to bring the color state inside the app component like this. Since the color state is associated with each box, we have created a box array state containing the colors for each of the boxes. In fact, we have added even the heading texts as states inside the box array along with the color and are using it from the state to pass it down to the box component via props. Now, instead of using the box component explicitly 6 times, we can iterate through the box array using the JavaScript map function and create the JSX tag for each element in the array like this. Here, we are taking the box array from the state. Let me highlight this and iterating through it using the map function. For each box component in the array, we are returning a JSX to print the corresponding box component. Here, while using the box component, we are passing both the heading text and the color from the state as props. If you remember earlier, we were passing only the heading text via props and not the color. as color was used as a state inside the box component itself. But now, since we have moved the color state up to the app component, we will have to pass the color also via props. Let's now move to the next step, that is, we will remove the state from the box component. So this is our box component code, and now we will remove the state from the box component. Since the color state now belongs to the app component, the color change function should also go inside the app component so that it can communicate with the state data. Hence, it should be removed from here. Now that box has become stateless component, we can convert it into a functional component. And for this, we will have to change the class to an arrow function notation. The function will take props as an argument. We can name it anything. We will also have to remove the render function. Then we will change the color usage to props. And since it is now a functional component, we will use only props instead of this .props. Similarly, even for the heading text, we will have to make the change accordingly. Now the next challenge is to fix the change color function. Since the color state is now present in the app component, the change color function should also go up inside the app component so that it can communicate with the state color data. But let me remind you that it needs to be called within the box component. So how will it work? We will define the change color function inside the app component. Then we will pass the function to the box component via props along with other state data for it to be accessible inside the box component. Inside the box component, on clicking the button, we will call the function through props. Since we are storing the colors of the boxes together in the form of an array, on button click we will also have to pass an ID to the change color function to identify which box's color should change. So let us see how we can do this. First, we have to store an ID along with the color and heading text in the box array state like this to identify each box distinctively. Let me indent the code also simultaneously. The next step is to add the change color function and make necessary changes. This function makes an additional argument ID which denotes the box whose color needs to change. We are storing the entire boxes array in a new variable named boxes. Then we are making the color change in the respective box and then replacing the state data with this new boxes variable. We will have to pass the function along the ID to each box component via the props. When we pass the function to another component via props, we must bind the function to this object. This is done so that inside the function this should continue to refer to the app class object. Since the change color function will be called from within the box component, the binding will break and this inside the change color function would refer to something else. If the reason is not clear, you can simply remember to bind the function to this whenever we are passing a function to a component via props. Next, we will make necessary changes in the way we are calling the change color function in the box component as well. Since the change color function now is not a part of the box component and is instead sent as a prop, we will call the function using props. We will also pass the ID of the box being passed to it via props on button click so that in the app component, when the change color function executes, it would know which box component to work on. So let us execute this code. There you go. Everything is working exactly the way it was working earlier. Means we have been able to successfully flow the data from top level element to the child level elements. In this video, what we did was we refactored the entire code. Refactoring in simple terms means changing the structure of some existing code without changing the outcome of the code. Now, the next step is to use this refactored code to build the count feature, which we will discuss in the next video. Stay tuned.